Seaweed's very important as it grows in its natural habitat. It uptakes excess nutrients, it reduces ocean acidification, it sequesters carbon, and it provides habitat. So within a limited amount, the more you put into the ocean, the better it is for that ecosystem. Right now we're standing on Sydney Island on the coast of British Columbia, the southern end of Vancouver Island, in the traditional territories of the Wasanich First Nations. This is part of the Salish Sea, the backdrop of the Olympic Mountains and Mount Baker, and it's a great place to be growing seaweed. So there are over 10,000 species of seaweed in the world, and in British Columbia we have over 630 native species. The First Nations and Indigenous people of British Columbia have used seaweed in their diets and in their lives for millennia. The First Nations communities that we work with are smack in the middle of industry today. So when we introduced seaweed farming to them, they saw that as a natural extension of both their current capacities and capabilities and interests and what their elders and their traditional uses of seaweed are. Right now, with plant-based food and climate change coming to the forefront, there was a renewed focus on alternative sources of protein, on nutrition. We launched large-scale cultivation in British Columbia 2 years ago. We work with others that are getting into the industry as well. Anytime you work in and around the sea, you have to be very careful that you're not negatively impacting it. Cultivators create a farm in the ocean, which is ropes and floats and cement anchors, and we seed the farm with baby kelp or baby seaweed around December. Between December and March, the seaweed grows with only two important inputs, sunlight and seawater. So it's a very low impact crop. Around March, when we decide that the seaweed has grown to a great enough scale, we go out in boats, much like fishing vessels. We go alongside our farm and hand cut all the fronds from the lines into fishing totes for processing. We're going to process it right away. We freeze it, and then once we're ready to process it, we can either chop it and blanch it and use it as fresh seaweed, or we can dry it, dehydrate it, and turn it into a powder and then use that as other ingredients. And that's just on the food side. There are other important verticals for the use of seaweed, and they include feed for cows to reduce harmful methane emissions, bioplastics, there's a plastic-like material that can be derived from seaweed, pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals, it's used in the cosmetic industry, and there's quite a few other uses. Our focus as a company is to look at what's highest and best value, both for having sufficient revenue and profit to stay in business, but also to look at other important developments. And it's actually very tech focused. Folks are just discovering now the properties and the composition and how to work with seaweed. So we think in the coming years we're going to see a lot more use of seaweed than we do right now.